I'd like to invite you to turn to Mark chapter 1. Today, we are going to be finishing up our little mini-series looking in the beginning pages of the book of Mark. Before we come to Mother's Day next week and then into our Easter series leading up into Easter. We are to kind of label today, I'd call it the age-old battle. The age-old battle. We'll be looking and asking Dorian in just a couple minutes to read Mark chapter 1, verses 21 through 28. But before we get started, I'm gonna bend your ear for just a minute, and I'm gonna ask you to really kind of think for just a moment with me. If you enjoy stories, films, whether they're old or more modern, it's interesting. If you were to take all of those and sort of look at the general themes of stories throughout history, really, there's only about a dozen or so kinds of themes. Can you believe that? Now, I know this is a bit unfair, but I'm going to ask you if you could just think on your feet quickly and just run through your mind maybe your favorite stories, your favorite films. And if you're to boil down the basic theme, the basic genre, the basic kind of story that it is, can you shout out to me a kind of story? Like, for example, music, you have various kinds of music. You've got gospel music, you've got rock, you've got country, you've got all these kind of new things over the last 10 or 20 or 30 years that I've lost all the track of the names. But you have all different kinds of music, right? You've got something called bluegrass in the States. You've got all different sorts of things. Stories are the same way. Can you tell me the kinds of themes, the kinds of stories that maybe you like, and what's the underlying theme? Don't tell me an exact name of a film necessarily, unless you want to, but what kinds of themes can you think of?
Patience.
I'm sorry? Patience, okay. How would that be a theme? What kind of theme would it be? What's the underlying? For example, I'll give you one. Sacrifice. There's this general genre called sacrifice. Someone who sacrifices, and I'm thinking of a particular one that I have. Now, I've actually having a conversation with Bethany, and this is it's a Will Smith film. It's a real tearjerker. If you want to feel sad one night, watch this film. But it is an incredible story of sacrifice. It's called Seven Pounds, okay? I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it is a real tearjerker, a real story of sacrifice. That's one of the genres, actually. Can you give me another one?
Science fiction.
Science fiction, okay. Okay, what about another one? Another kind of story. Love stories, absolutely. Love stories all over the place, okay? The characters are different, the settings are different, the times are different, but when you drill down right to it, it is a love story, okay? Boy meets girl, whatever, all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry?
True story.
Well, true stories, that's not really a genre as such. Okay, what kind of other sorts of stories? Okay, maybe a mystery, but I'm sorry. Okay, a war, and the hero kind of story. That's a big genre. Now, I don't know how you do these website searches. I got curious about this, and I went and did a search. And this lists the top, these dozen or 15 genres, kinds of stories. The number one it lists is the hero's journey, the hero kind of story, okay? Number two is love and sacrifice, number two. Number three is good versus evil, good versus evil. And if you were to sit down in 10 minutes to write down the number of good versus evil accounts, stories I'm sure we could come up with a massive list. And lo and behold, today, we're going to be looking at probably the top of them all. We're going to dip into an encounter with good versus evil. As Dorian comes up in just a minute to read the scriptures, I was thinking about this, and we spent 3 or 4 weeks looking at, Satan and Satan's work in the world and evil and all that kind of thing. And, I'm absolutely convinced that he will do all he can to cause disruption. Now, there is something that I've heard about in this whole thing with the war in Ukraine. Have you ever heard of something called the scorched earth policy? You heard of this before, okay? I've never heard of it prior to about a few months back. The idea is that that if there's a war going on, that the enemy, that if one of the sides knows that it's going to lose, it will throw caution to the wind and cause destruction and chaos just for the sake of causing destruction and chaos. If they're going to lose land, they're going to say, well, if we're going to lose the land, then the country or whatever is not going to have any resources. It's going to be absolutely worthless, and they call that a scorched earth tactic. And as I was thinking about that, I think this is Satan's ploy. Satan knows that he is the loser. And if Satan knows that he's a loser, guess who's the winner? Who's the winner? God's the winner, okay? It may look like Satan's the winner, but that's not indeed the case. However, I think Satan takes a scorched earth policy in his tactics, in that he will cause as much destruction and chaos and problems as he can until the time of his final judgment. So today we want to look at a little bit of this particular account, thinking about Satan's work, Jesus' relationship to evil, and then the response to that, and then what we can take away from that. Okay, so if you have your papers, I would like to encourage you to follow along with us, because we're going to be looking at a few different things. And the first thing, I'd like to look at these first couple of verses, and I like to sort of theme these together, that there's the challenge to listen to what Jesus says in the first couple of verses. Listen to what Jesus says, because the battle that we're facing is who we are listening to. During our retreat, we sort of challenged each other with some time of asking ourselves, are we listening to the lies of the enemy, or are we listening to the truth of God? Do we understand who we are in Christ, or are we listening to Satan trying to sort of beat us down, that we're worthless and we have no purpose and all these kinds of things? Because that is sort of the message of the world. Or if the message of the world is, yes, you have purpose, but there's no foundation for that purpose. Whereas God, as we are created in his image, gives us real purpose, gives us a real sense of who we are. So let me read those couple of verses real quick again. And then they came into Capernaum. And this is just after the encounter with the fishermen and so forth. Remember, we did that last week. They came into Capernaum and immediately went on the Sabbath. He entered into the synagogue and taught, as he did. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. They listened to what Jesus was saying. Now, I think for anyone who remembers the day, do you remember the days of school? You remember that? Yeah. Maybe college, maybe even a university. I've had many conversations with lots of people over the years. And when I speak to the young people here in Rosington, and they moan about going to school. And I realize sometimes school experiences are good, sometimes not so good. But when I tell them, I think every young person in Rosington needs to spend 2 weeks in Uganda, a country like that, where school, I mean, if they go to school, it is a privilege. It is they would give their left leg to have the opportunities that are here. And I realized once you get used to something, then you don't appreciate it very much. But there's all kinds of teachers, and I had all kinds of teachers as well. And so I need to get a little bit more help now. What makes a good teacher? If you're to try and go back into the days of school or the days of college or the days of uni, and you remembered that one person or that two people who you thought, wow, they were really good teachers, what was it about them that made them a good teacher?
Listening.
What?
Listening.
That the teacher was willing to listen to you. Yeah, absolutely. Sir? Communication. They were able to communicate what they were trying to teach. Bethany. They care about the students. And patience.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Bethany mentioned about caring about the students. There's an award. I think they have the National Teacher of the Year award, but I think there's then a global Teacher of the Year. And I'm not sure how you even work all that out, but there'll be submissions and so forth. And there's more than, you see, every time I read those kind of stories, it's the teacher that goes beyond the norm of more than just in a classroom. It'd be the teacher who takes another job because their students have no shoes. Their students have no books. Their students have no notebooks or pens. And they'll get a job because the school does not have the money to provide those sort of things. So this teacher, out of love for their children, for their students, they will do those kinds of things. There are some teachers that are better than others. And I thank God for every teacher, but boy, what an amazing thing that there are teachers like that. Jesus was that kind of a teacher. He listened. He communicated truth to the people in a way that was extraordinary. He cared for the people that he taught. I believe as God continues to work in our church, God is raising up teachers. And I'm going to challenge every person that desires to be a teacher, that desires to be an influencer to other people. I'd like to challenge you to be a good teacher. Be someone who cares for the people that you teach, that you will be able to and willing to listen to what they're saying, to be able to engage in a level that's beyond just the ABCs, to be able to connect into the heart. That's where it's at. As Jesus was speaking, they were listening, and they thought, wow, Jesus does things differently. He does things differently. See, Mark is kind of unique. And if you were to read the four Gospels, and the word gospel means good news, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the four Gospels. Mark is a bit unique in that he often refers to Jesus as the teacher. As the teacher. That's his unique perspectives. Whereas the other Gospels, the reference to Jesus as teacher is only by outsiders, oddly enough, and Judas. Isn't that interesting? That's another story, though. But the Bible says here in verses 21 and 22, then in verse 22 specifically, he says that he taught them as one having authority. Authority. The word authority also means power. Okay? And I'll give you the word for that. Okay? The word is exousia. Okay? Can you say exousia? Can you say that with me on the count of three? 1, 2, 3. Exousia. Doesn't have a nice ring to it. Exousia. That's much better than Wingardia Leviosa, okay? That's kind of... Does anyone have any idea what I'm on about other than Bethany?
I do.
Mitch does, okay? That's a Harry Potter reference, okay? Exousia. Jesus taught with what? Power. He taught with authority. But then we have a little bit of an understanding about what they're actually on about. Notice what it says. He taught them as one having exousia. power, authority, not as one of the scribes. What is a scribe? Okay. Now, for our thinking, a scribe is what? Someone who does what? Who writes things down. Yeah, and that was one of their jobs, but these were the educated people. These would have been the teachers of the time. These would have been the ones who sat at others to be able to listen to them, to be able to learn. And these would have been the folks in society, the folks of the culture who were educated. And as they were listening to Jesus, they were listening to what Jesus said, how he said it, and they said, "Whew, he is something else. He is not like these lot over here. I mean, they went to university, they had all the degrees, they had all this, that." They say, he's different. Because what the scribes did, what they did was, all they did was sort of repeat, regurgitate what anyone else had said. But as Jesus was taking biblical truth, he was taking the Old Testament and applying to who they were and explaining things in such a way that they were drawn in to the teacher. And by the way, for anyone who teaches, that's what you want to do. You want to engage with people and show them how all the dots connect. That's what's important. They said, he is someone who is different. Why, the scribes, they're giving out facts. They're giving their own interpretation on all the laws. It's lifeless. It's boring. Means nothing to me. And they're just there because they have to be. But as Jesus comes into town with his teaching of exousia, he draws the crowd because they said, wow, we've never heard things like this before. And we love to hear what he is saying. So there he is. There's Jesus. He comes in, he teaches, he draws the crowd, and then something incredible happens. We come into this time, this next major part within that little passage, verses 23 through 27. Let's read this together again. Now there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, a demon. And he cried out, saying, "Let us alone." Well, it's interesting to say us. Let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be quiet, come out of him." And when the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him. And they were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, "Who is this? What new doctrine is this? For what authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." So not only do we need to be aware and listen to what Jesus says, by the way, while we're still with the listening bit, do we listen to what Jesus says? You may say, "Eric, I'm in church today. Of course I listen." No, that's not what I asked. Okay. Today this week at St. Joseph's, I had the honor of going in and working with 12 of the children to prepare an assembly. And they are literally from year 1 to year 6, 2 each. And that was a bit of a challenge in itself, but we pulled it off. And I was asked to do something about communication, and particularly about listening. And I remember forever and a day, my mom saying to me, "Eric, anytime I say something, it seems like it goes in one ear and out the other," right? Did anyone ever else say that? Do you ever say that? You know what I'm talking about? Yes. Okay. So how many times did Jesus say, "He that has ears to hear, let him listen"? Do you remember all that? So that's essentially saying, listen, most of us have ears. I think all of us have ears, I don't think anyone here has any particular birth defects, that we don't have ears. Now, it's true that Doreen, Janice, Lisa's over there. Some of us have ears physically that don't work so well, right? Thankfully, we've got these wonderful little devices they call hearing aids that are meant to help out, and I think on the whole they do a fairly good job, but Jesus is not even talking about that. He's saying, are the things that I'm saying to you, do they come in one ear and they stay? Do they then filter down to the heart, up to your mind? And does it affect what you do with your hands, where you go with your feet, what you see with your eyes, and what you say with your mouth? He that has ears to hear, listen. Soak it in. Let it affect who you are. Let it affect what you do. That's what these lot were doing. But then coming to this next section, know that Jesus has power over evil. So the battle is that of belief. That of belief. Do we not just listen to what Jesus says? Do we believe what Jesus says? Because part of the challenge is we can say, well, I come to church on a Sunday morning, or I call myself a Christian, and I tick all the boxes. Now, Doreen taught me all this, okay? You tick all the boxes, yeah? I've done my bit, and that's all that it is. Is that all that it is? No. Jesus is asking and challenging us, do we really believe what he's saying and then take action on that belief? Okay? I mean, the word is a hypocrite, okay? And Jesus challenged the Pharisees, the religious crowd of the day. He said, you lot, you know what the Bible says. You can quote it. And I was just reading something in preparation for this week, and there are people who believe that some of the Pharisees would memorize books of the Old Testament, or some even memorize the entire thing. Can you imagine memorizing the whole of the Bible? Can't imagine. Especially the names, yeah? Can't imagine memorizing all those names. And boy, they knew it left, right, and center, but did they live it? They didn't live it. How many times did God say to Israel, he said, don't give me your sacrifices. I don't ask for sacrifice. What I want is an honest heart. What I want is truth. That's what I want. Now, he's not saying, now God's the one who established the sacrifices, okay? But there was a purpose for them. There was a purpose for them. But the problem is that the people had made the sacrifices the main point. And God said that was never the main point. You really misunderstand. So we need to get this thing of belief nailed down. Because Jesus came down and said, listen, this thing of evil is real. This thing of evil is real. Notice, you see what happened there? There's a man in the synagogue with an unclean spirit, with a demon possessing his body. And he cried out, leave us alone, is what this demon said through this man. Now, believe it or not, there's not everybody who actually even accepts the reality of evil. Not everyone believes that. But the truth is, in order for good to be a real thing, evil has to be real. Otherwise, good means nothing. So evil is real. Satan is real. Demons are real. Spirits are real. And we have to be very, very careful, okay? And I shared with you this before, but I'll just mention this again because I have a totally new crowd here. I would venture to say, now we have people from many different countries now, which is amazing, okay? And when I was in Uganda, I would say being in Uganda was the only other place that I felt that there was as much spirit activity as in England, okay? Before coming to England, I didn't sense as much as when I came here. The number of people telling me things that's happening in their houses, or hearing things and seeing things, it's something else. And then in my times in Uganda of all kinds of things, witch doctor, all kinds of things. People applying spirits in many, many different ways. The truth is, it's a reality, and we need to be aware of the truth of this, the reality of this. And the number of people who have run across of, messing about with Ouija boards. Everyone knows what a Ouija board is, right? You know what that is? Messing about with that. Finding the likes of mediums fascinating. Oh, I want to talk to my nan who has passed away, so I'll go and pay my 12 or 15 pounds and let someone do whatever they do. It's a dangerous thing, okay? Scripturally, we are warned to avoid those kinds of things. Chase, our youngest, rang up this week, and he threw me a question. But Chase is the king of random. I'll tell you that right now. You never know what's going to come out of Chase's mouth. He said, Dad, he said, I remember you were talking one time about being careful about meditation. He's been stressing at uni. He's got this project and that project and a group project. He was stressing about group projects because they're not pulling their weight and they're not doing the work, and he feels like he has to do all the work and all these kind of things. So he's gone on to some kind of university support group, and they talked to him about meditation. He said, Dad, what's this about meditation? I said, well, he said, all depends on what you meditate on, okay? If it's all about, okay, you need to open up your mind to whatever is out there and invite whatever in, and people do this. This is the thing. And that's almost like opening a door for demonic spirits, okay? So we have to be very careful. We are challenged in the Bible to meditate, but meditate on what? On the Lord. To remember the goodness of God. To focus on God's character and God's qualities and all that. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But to have this mindset of being able to sit and have your mind go blank and being open to anything and everything, it's a very, very, very dangerous thing. So please be very careful about all that. Demonic possession is real and very possible even in 2025 in the United Kingdom. It's a real thing. However, I want you to notice something incredibly important here, that the demons come in and they recognize who Jesus is. Isn't that something? Notice what it says. They cried out. They said, let us alone. What have we to do with you? And they named him Jesus of Nazareth. Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are. You are the Holy One of God. Now, that's some pretty good stuff, isn't it? The demons knew Jesus' status as the Holy One of God. You know what? Truth be told, those demons were more clued in than the 12 that were following Jesus. They were better Christians than the 12. Yeah. How many times did they say, no, Jesus, what? He can do this. He can raise someone from the dead. He can heal someone. How is this possible? Where here these demons were saying, you are the Holy One of God. You are the special one from God. So they recognized he was holy. They recognized he was from God. They recognized he was unique. The demons, likewise, did not recognize themselves as being holy. They didn't recognize themselves as being from God, but all that was applied to Jesus. But not only that, and we need to grab this and hold on to this for all of our lives, they recognized their position relative to Jesus. They didn't like it, but they said, Jesus, you are the Holy One of God. Are you come to destroy us? So what's the message behind that? The message behind that, if Jesus wanted to, he could destroy them anytime he wanted to. Now, I'll be honest with you, I sat down and was scratching my head a little bit, and I thought, seemed like a pretty good opportunity for Jesus to get a few off the chessboard. Yeah? Why didn't he? Why, if I was Jesus, I would have said, well, here we go, perfect opportunity, we'll sort these lot out and get rid. But God has a plan for all that he does. But they recognized their position to Jesus, that Jesus was the Holy One of God. He could destroy them at any time, and they were fearful. They were fearful. And I want to remind you and remind dear old Pastor Eric as well, that we do not need to fear anything of the evil one. Can I tell you something? I don't want to freak you out. I don't want to put any kind of fear at all in you. But when this building sort of first opened, I was walking down with someone, and he said, you know what? I've heard lots of stories about this building. I've heard lots of stories that spirits walk the halls and all these kind of things. He said, I'm kind of scared to go down there at night and so forth. I said, well, I've not noticed anything. And truth be told, if there were spirits that roam these halls, God will sort it out. It's not a problem because God is stronger than any of the demonic spirits. God is more powerful than any of the demonic spirits, and God knows exactly what he is doing. So we do not need to fear. We do not need to fear because you are in Christ the victor. Do you really believe that? Because now, we're on about know that Jesus has power over evil. So our battle is that of belief. Do we really believe that, and do we live like we really believe it? Jesus then moves on. He says, listen, I'm going to show you something here, that he has power over evil. They called out, you're the Holy One of God. Are you come to destroy us? And Jesus, in verse 25, Jesus rebuked them. He said, shut up. Okay? In our modern words, shut up and come out. Now, there was no special hoopla, no TV cameras, no special whatevers. Jesus, being who he was, the Son of God, God the Son, exousia, power, has power over that demon, over those demonic spirits. He commanded them to be quiet and come out of them. There was no argument. There was no sitting down at the negotiating table. There was no give and take and so forth and so on. Jesus said, listen, I'm God, you're not. I'm powerful, you're much less powerful. I'm eternal, your time is coming. Be quiet and get out. They didn't even try to put up a fight, although they threw a tantrum, as little children do, right? If anyone who've had children, you've seen the tantrums, right? You know what a tantrum is. The 3-year-old especially, when they don't get their way, they'll throw the tantrum, and that's exactly what happened. Verse 26, and when the unclean spirit had convulsed him, and that's the idea like a fit. He threw himself around physically as that spirit was coming out and cried out in a loud voice. We're not given the words that the evil spirit said. He came out of him. When Jesus says something, that is it. Aren't you glad about that? What is some of the things that Jesus says? Jesus says, for God so loved the world that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Satan comes up to you and whispers in your ear, are you really sure God said that? Can you really trust what God says? Maybe Jesus was wrong on that occasion. Tell him to shut up. go away. What Jesus says, he means. Jesus says, I love you. I've got plans for you. I've got purpose for you. You're in the palm of my hand, and I'm in the palm of God's hand. I don't know how that works, but I do know that it's pretty amazing. And that you're safe. You are safe in the arms of Christ. Eric, you don't know the problems that I'm facing. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Severus made the comment. He said, you know what? We want to be able to have joy and sing, and it's not about circumstance. It's not about circumstance. Listen, circumstances come and they go. And you can promise they'll come again, right? They'll come again, but they'll go. But at the end of the day, God's got it all to hand. And you don't need to worry. What Jesus says, he does. He commands the unclean spirits, and they obey him. Are we as obedient as the unclean spirits? I'll let that percolate a little bit. I'll let that simmer a little bit in the back of your mind. Are we as obedient? Are we as obedient? But then we're going to quickly move on. We're going to finish up for this morning as we move on to just that last verse, looking at verse 28. And immediately his fame spread throughout all the region around Galilee. So here's the challenge. It's the spread of the news of Jesus, and the battle in this arena is the battle of obedience. The battle of obedience. Now, when I read that, it's only just a few verses, and immediately his fame spread throughout all the region. Here's a couple of bits. Here's what it doesn't mean. Here's what it doesn't mean. There was no television. There was no radio. There was no internet. The enemies of Christ would not have spread this kind of a word. So we're down now to very, very few choices. How was this happening? How was this happening? What it does mean is that those who were the friends of Christ, those who were the followers of Christ, were absolutely blown away by what they saw. They were absolutely blown away by what they heard. They were absolutely taken by the truth that Jesus was giving, and they said, we just can't be quiet about this. Listen, this changes everything. So they thought they were willing to listen. They were willing to hear. They were willing to allow it to affect their heart. They were willing to allow it to affect their mind, to affect their hands, to affect their feet. And then they believed it as they saw what Jesus had done. And then through one thing or another, it spread because they were excited about the message. They were absolutely convinced. Now often, and it's interesting, often Jesus will command those who are healed to be silent. I've always puzzled about that. But often Jesus will tag a little phrase on there saying, because it's not yet my time. So God had a plan, had a timetable for everything that he was doing. But he would say, I know you've been healed, but keep it to yourself for right now. There was no such command here, but they were absolutely convinced. They were absolutely taken by everything that Jesus had did. And they said, boy, we've got to let everyone know about this. They were so motivated. They were so motivated. Got a quick question for you. If your favorite pizza takeaway or your favorite petrol station, if you're a driver, was offering one day only 75% off. All right? I know it's not going to happen. If they were offering 75% off, and Chris would be driving all over the place because of all the orders or whatever's going on, okay? Or petrol half off, one day only. What would you do? Jump in the queue, but I bet you'd go on Facebook, You'd contact all your WhatsApp friends and your Facebook friends and all. You know what? The petrol station just right down the street, man, they're offering half price off. What a great deal. Get yourself down there. It's only for today, right? That's what we do. But do we view God's promises the same way? Are we as convinced? Are we as excited about God's truth as we are about a petrol station that offers half off on a Tuesday?